Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for being here today. Welcome to our webinar. If you've joined us before, welcome back. If this is your first time joining us, we are happy that you're here. We're glad that you're able to make it tonight. My name is Jerry V. I'm one of the program coordinators for the Empowering Financial Wellness Program with Utah State University Extension. Joining me tonight is my colleague Vincenza. She is also one of our program coordinators. And you'll hear from her tonight as well. We also have Alicia here. She's our intern and she'll be moderating the chat tonight. If you have any questions during our webinar, please feel free to put in your questions in there. And to start off, if you could please introduce yourselves in the chat, your name and last name, and tell us where you're joining us from. Would love to know that. So tonight we're going to talk about debt reduction tricks. We are going to talk about the things that we need to learn or we need to do, the homework that we need to do before considering taking on any new debt. As we've learned in this past year, a lot of unexpected things happen, and a lot of those things were out of our control. So if there's one thing that we can have control over, is a possible financial disaster in our personal lives. And we have some control over that if we can be careful and be very intentional about our spending and how we approach debt. So we're going to talk about a few things tonight to help you avoid that financial disaster. So we are going to cover three things tonight. We are going to talk about navigating the steps you need to take before taking on new debt. We are also going to create a real debt report. What that is, we'll show you in a little bit. So just hang tight and we'll go through what that means and what that looks like and how you can create that for yourself, which is really important because you have to know that. You have to know your real debt report before you even start thinking about getting a new debt or taking on a new loan. And then the last one, we'll talk about calculating your net worth. Okay, when we take on new debt or we add debt into our, if when we think about debt and our long-term financial goals, your net worth is an important factor to look at. Okay, because how does a new debt fit in that long-term financial planning that you want to have in your life? But to start off, I'm gonna give it to Vincenza, and we're gonna have a quick poll. Okay, and if you can raise your virtual hand if you have that option. Or if you don't have that option, just rate by show of hand. It's a true or false poll. So if you think it's true, raise your hand. If you think it's false, don't do anything. Okay. So here are the questions.
Okay. So is it true or false that there are such things as a good kind of debt and a bad kind of debt? If you think that's true, raise your hand. That there are good debts and bad debts. Okay, we have a few hands up. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So that it is true. So when we talk about good debt, we're talking about money that you owe for things that can actually help you build wealth or increase your net worth over time. And some examples of that would be like a student loan, because the ultimate goal of taking on debt to get an education is that by the time you graduate, you'll be able to get a better paying job. So that's an investment in your future. Another example of a good debt would be a mortgage. Typically, homes appreciate in value over time. Also, another example would be like a business loan. If you're starting out a business and you're borrowing some money to get some startup costs, eventually that can help you build your business. And when we talk about bad debt, I mean, debt is debt. It's money that you owe, but bad debt, when we say that, we're talking about things like high interest rate credit cards or consumer debt that really does very little to improve your net worth. For example, like a payday loan, a personal loan. using credit card for discretionary spending on things that may bring you joy, like going on vacation or buying clothing, but it's not really an investment in your overall net worth, especially if you're paying a high interest for it. So that's when we differentiate good debt and bad debt. The second question is, I wanted to ask you, is it true or false that 80% of Americans have some form of debt? Raise your hand if you think that's true. Does that sound high or does that sound low? Do you think it's true? If you think it's true, raise your hand. Okay, it's true. About 80% of Americans do have some form of debt, and that's according to research that was done by the Pew Charitable Trusts. So the key with having debt is that you're trying to avoid having debt that's very high interest. We don't want to be having to pay, we have debt obligations and we're having to pay late or not able to meet our commitments because we're, something happened with our income or we got ourselves in, over our heads. So the average amount of debt that US households have as of last year is about $90,000, just to give you some perspective. And that does include a mortgage. But the average annual income as of last year in the United States is only $50,000. Now, most people can't afford to buy a house in cash. So that makes sense if we're talking about including mortgages, but that's just to give you some perspective. So another thing to look at is we're going to be talking about net worth because there's more to the story about debt. There's more to the story about your financial picture than just debt and income. And we'll talk a little bit more about net worth, what that is, and how you would calculate that. So the last poll question is, only high income individuals can have a high net worth. If you think that's true, raise your hand. If you think it's false, then do nothing. How many people think only high income individuals can have a high net worth? I'm not seeing any hands, and that is correct. You can make $1 million a year, right? You can have a great income, but be spending $2 million a year. It doesn't mean just because you have a high income, so doesn't mean that you can have a high net worth. You can have an average, very modest salary your whole life and have a very high net worth. I read a story in the news recently about this gentleman who, after he came home from World War II, he got a job as a janitor and a gas station attendant. You remember when we used to have gas station attendants? We don't really have those anymore. But that's what he did his whole life. And by the time he was age of 92, which is when he passed, so we're talking about a lifetime of probably being frugal, spending smartly, he amassed over $8 million net worth, which is just a testament to say that you don't have to make millions of dollars to have a high net worth. It's all those decisions, those small things that we do throughout our life. And sometimes we're lucky, we get inheritances or windfalls or things, and sometimes things happen in our lives that we can't control. So it's controlling the controllables and knowing that if we can be mindful of how we spend our money, how much debt we get into, and how much money we save, it is possible to have a pretty good net worth by the time whatever your financial goals are. Okay, so that's our poll. The next thing we want to talk about was the first point in our webinar tonight is talking about what steps should I take before I consider getting more debt. So can you afford it? Well, how do you determine if you can afford it or not? So if you budget already, you'd want to add this additional monthly payment into your budget and see what that looks like. If you're new to budgeting or you haven't done it before, it might be a good idea to create a basic budget, making sure you cover all of your expenses and track your spending for several months to really see how much can I afford before it starts to feel a little bit too tight. If you have any money left over at the end of the month, after you've met all your debt obligations and your expenses, is that gonna work for you? I wish I would have thought about that when I bought a second car a few years ago. We were a one-car family, and I didn't take into account all of the additional costs with not just having the car payment, but having to pay for the gas and having to pay for the insurance and having for the car maintenance. So I didn't really think it through, and it put us in a really, really tight position. The second thing you want to think about before you make a decision about taking on additional debt is, does it fit with my current long-term financial goals? So if you have clear goals, it's going to make it easier for you to decide whether it makes sense for you or not. For example, is it going to affect how much money you can put in savings by taking on that additional debt? Is it going to take away from maybe what you're putting away for retirement? And just making sure that you can make your other debt obligations. For example, are you still able to save for emergencies? We saw what happened in this last year. Any other financial goals? Typically, when you say yes to something, and you've got a tight budget, you're probably going to have to say no to something else, and maybe you can make some adjustments into your budget. But just going into this decision with some clear ideas of what it's going to look like. And one thing I used to tell folks that I would work with is, if they're considering taking on debt for maybe a nice to have or don't have to have, try living with that new payment for a few months, and just put that payment into savings and see what that feels like. Does it feel tight? And that way you can kind of get a feel for, like, most of our spending is habitual. Other than our fixed bills, our discretionary spending is usually, we're pretty habitual about how we spend our money. So see what that would feel like. And the last thing, obviously, is, are you going to qualify for new debt? So for example, if you're looking at getting a mortgage, the lender is going to look at not just your credit score, but they're going to look at a real close look at your ability to meet your mortgage payments. And they're going to do that by using a what's called a debt to income ratio. So for example, if you have a poor credit score and you have already too much of your income, for example, more than 36% of your gross monthly income going already toward debt, it's going to be difficult to obtain any additional loans. So what I'm trying to get at is, if you have a poor credit score, or you have a pretty good credit score, but you're maxed out on your debt, it's going to be difficult to get additional credit, or in order to get it, you're going to have to pay a lot more for that. You're probably going to have to pay a higher interest rate, because the more debt you have, the more at risk you are to the lender. And so in order to be able to, financially, for a company to take that risk, they're going to say, well, we're going to charge you an exorbitant amount of interest, so that even if you do default, we would have at least collected all of that interest from you. Usually 43% when you're looking at a mortgage is the highest that a borrower can have and still obtain a mortgage. And anything above that, it's probably going to be difficult to get that loan, just simply because your debts are too high compared to your gross monthly income. And there's one key factor I want to mention here: gross monthly income. We're talking about money before taxes are taken out. So this is not even really your take-home pay, right? It's not really what we're bringing home every month. So it's even more, if we think about it, even more exaggerated. Now, what is a lot of debt to one person might feel different to another debt. Some people are uncomfortable with a very small amount of debt, and some people are comfortable with, thousands and thousands of dollars of debt. So it's a personal thing, but if this at least gives you a guideline of, where should I be, or how much debt is too debt, in terms of how lenders and creditors will look at it.
So if I could add just real quick, this is just taking into account your debts. This is not accounting for non-debt expenses like your groceries, your
Right.
bills.
Yeah.
So you have to take that into account too, when you're looking at how much money is tied into debt and the things that are not debt, but you have to pay for anyway.
Right. That's the other thing. That's why having a budget, or looking at what your monthly spending in, really gives you like a good overall vision of, where is my money going, and can I afford this? A lot of people look at the payment. For example, a car dealership is a classic example of how they advertise everything by the monthly payment. But you're not really looking at cost of ownership, or how much is that car really going to cost me if I'm going to finance it for X amount of years. And if you wanted to do a real quick calculation of how you would calculate your own debt to income ratio, let's say I have a mortgage that's $1,200. I've got a $400 car payment, and I've got $500 a month going toward other debt. This is just debt we're talking about, not expenses. And let's say I'm bringing home $5,000 before taxes. So I simply would divide the total of my debt payments, which would be $2,100, divided by 5,000, you get 0.42. You put that in your calculator. So that's 42%. So it would probably be difficult for me to get to qualify for a mortgage or to get some kind of, probably I'd qualify for a credit card, but it would be difficult. So if you're in that situation, some things that you could do is maybe focus for a little while on paying down some of the debt that you currently have, or possibly refinancing some debt that you have that could lower your monthly payment, that would reduce how much you're paying every month toward debt. And when we take on debt, typically this is something that we're being obligated for, not for a day, but maybe for several years. So take that into account into your own personal financial situation before you take on debt. You know, the more research you do, the more you understand, the better decision that you can make. We just want you to position yourself to be a successful borrower and not get in over your head. It's difficult to live so close to that financial edge because if something happens, as we saw what happened this last year, what if you lost your job or your hours were cut, or somebody, maybe two of you are working and one of you lost your job or got sick or whatnot. So we have to be mindful of trying not to live so close to that financial edge that we have no wiggle room for when life happens. So the next thing we're going to talk about that Jeremy will take over is looking at the total cost of borrowing and how to visualize your debt.
Okay, so let's stick to the car loan example real quick here. And we'll be talking about this example for the most part of this webinar tonight, because it's just a classic example of how the numbers do not really, the monthly numbers do not really tell you the whole picture. Okay, so the one other thing that we want you to think about when considering taking on new debt is, what is the total cost of repaying that debt? So in this example, say you're buying a car from a dealership, they say it's $20,000, right? If you take this $20,000, we close the deal, here's your key, you walk away with this car, right? And then they usually give you this graph or this table, this financing numbers whatsoever. And that's after they go back and forth to that glass room and they say, I'll talk to my manager. They give you different numbers. And then they'll say, how about this monthly payment? Can you make this monthly payment? How can they make this work for you so you get out of this lot with a new car, right? Sound familiar? I promise I've never sold a car before. But I mean, everybody's heard that spiel from a car salesman, right? But here's, look at this table right here. 36 months, 48, 60, 72, 84, right? The interest rates are different. And then they, depending on what interest rate you qualify for. But say you qualify for these interest rates. There's 3% and you pay it off in 36 months. And then there's 2.5% and you qualify and you pay it off in 84 months. If you only look at that interest rate and say, oh, my monthly payment is $259. I can do that, right? But here's the catch. You'll be paying $260 a month for 7 years. And in the end, you would have paid $1,800 in interest. But if you took the 3% interest for 36 months, your monthly payment is almost twice, right? To the monthly payment for 84 months, but you've only paid $938 in interest. Now, what is more appealing to you now? Now that you know that over the life of the loan, you would have paid more in interest, even if you were paying less monthly payments for 84 months than you would if you took that 36-month loan.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that 84 months is 7 years, right? Yeah. Most people keep their cars for about 4 years. And when you buy a new car,
If
And when you
even
buy
if you sell it after 4 years, you would not recoup that $20,000.
just the first 4 years of a car, you lose up to about a 50% depreciation. So if you finance a car for that long, just be thinking about the fact that that car might be depreciating faster than you can pay it off.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to decide in 4 years or 3 years you want to change your car, you're probably going to be upside down on it, meaning you owe more on the vehicle than what the vehicle is even worth. Not what it's worth to you, but what the Kelley
Mm-hmm.
Blue Book value is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's just something to keep in mind when you're financing. They'll do financing cars for 96 months. I've seen it.
And they'll finance cars for 0.9%.
They
Right?
will.
But
Yeah.
how long? But for how long? We're
That's
not
when they
telling
make
you
money.
we're
They-
not telling you guys not to buy a car, because if you really need a car, go ahead and buy one. But just be aware, you have to be an informed buyer. Do your homework,
Yeah.
because that's where the classic car salesmen are shrewd uh, stereotype comes from. Because if we don't do our homework, then they'll just show us, here's the monthly payment, what can we do so you can, leave this car lot tonight with a car. And if we don't do our homework, we are going to drive away with a car without really knowing the total cost of repaying that debt. And this works for any other loan that you might take on, maybe even your mortgage, right? What else can I'm thinking about? uh, a payday loan, even, right? When you have to repay that.
Debt
So
consolidation also, debt consolidation, like
debt consolidation, which is very popular, a way of, if I combine all my debt and I get a new interest rate. So and later we'll show you how you could look, if you are trying to manage multiple debts, for example. We'll show you a really great tool to visualize your debt and be on top of it, and maybe even see how you can pay it off faster. And that's where the real debt report comes in. So what's a real debt report? Your real debt report is going to show you all of your debts, how much you're paying towards the principal and how much you're paying towards the interest. Okay. How are you going to do that? So 3 things. Okay, make a list of all your debts. If you don't know all of your debts, if you're just, every time it's due, you're trying to pay one thing at a time. If you don't know all your debts, go get your credit report. Okay, that's where everything that you're paying towards, everything that you have, every creditor that you owe money, it will be listed there. And that's actually a great opportunity for you to see if, there's something there that's not correct. So make sure that that report is accurate. So make a list of all your debts. This might include your credit card debts, your mortgage, your auto loans, your payday loans, anything that's in collections, student loans, any personal loans that you have that you borrowed from, say, your parents or a sibling or a friend even, and any bills that you are behind on. Because we know you have those late fees, and then it really feels like it's another, it is another debt, in principle. If you, like I said, if you have many debts and unsure if you have listed them all in your little worksheet, and we'll send a worksheet to you, by the way, when we send a recording of this presentation. Like I said, check your credit report and to see if you missed anything. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is list how much you still owe. Okay, what's the interest rate on those loans and what your minimum monthly payment is. Okay, most of this information can be found in your monthly statement. If not, contact your creditor and ask for a statement with those information. Okay, but usually it's in your bill. And then calculate what you really owe. That's step 3. Okay, doing this by hand uh, can be a lot of work, right? There's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of apps even, but I'm going to show you right now a really effective tool. Let's see. And it's called PowerPay. Uh, it's developed by Utah State University Extension, and it's a really great tool to show you how you can pay off your debt and how you can pay off your debt faster than you think. Okay, let me just pull it up. If it will let me pull it up real quick. Okay. Okay, can everybody see it right now? Okay, this is PowerPay. Okay, you go to powerpay.org, and it will, if you don't have an account yet, it's very straightforward. You just create an account, and then you create a profile, and what you do is you create this list. Okay, so for example, this person has 11 outstanding debts, including student loan, which is deferred until the year 2023, when this person is expected to start paying off that student loan. But see here, this is everything that this individual owes. So this individual has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 credit card debts. Okay. And then this person has 2 auto loans. And then this person has 1, 2, 3 store cards, one from Macy's, Nordstrom, and Gap. And then there's a student loan. In total, this person owes a lot. This person owes a lot, right? Now, when you
Relative. That's relative, right?
yeah, well, for me, if I was this person, I would be pulling my hair out. I will be like, how did I get here? It's a lot of online shopping. It's probably what got me here.
And just to clarify, you would only put things on here that you're not paying off every month, right? If you have credit cards that you use and you pay off, that's not something that you'd want to put in this scenario. It's just things that you're carrying a balance and you're paying off over time.
Yep. So if this person were to pay this off and not do anything, just pay minimum every month, right? This is now your real debt report. Okay. If you are this person and you're not paying extra, you're just paying the minimum every month, it will take you 22 years and 9 months, okay, to pay off a total of 137,447 and 67 cents. And you would have paid $53,000, $52,407 in interest. Okay, that's only paying minimum. Now, this scenario, like I said, is only if you're only paying minimum and you're not incurring any more debt, right? You're not spending anything. You're not using this some credit card anymore. You're not using this Visa. You stopped shopping at Macy's. You forgot that Nordstrom exists. You're not incurring any more debt, and you would still have to pay this. It will take you about 23 years, right? If this happened to myself, I would not want to be paying debt for 23 years. Imagine where this $53,000 could have gone if I was not paying that towards debt. Okay, so that's why it's important to create your real debt report. I'm gonna try and show you. Of course, it logged me out. Let's see. I'm just gonna go back, and because I want to show you what it would look like if we use PowerPay to its
Can't go too fast, Jeremy.
what? Don't type fast.
It's
Yeah, guys, this is a little sensitive app. And I say app because it's available in iOS. But it's also I'd rather use it on my desktop actually, because it shows me a lot more features. And once it pulls up, but I just wanted to show you how if you really need to like um uh take out a loan, say you're trying to buy a house, right? And what can you do if, say, this is your situation right now? What can you do to, one, improve your debt to income ratio, two, increase your credit score because now you don't have too much debt, right? And you're not behind on your debt, and you're now in good standing with your creditors. So let's see. And this is what's great about PowerPay. It will show you a strategy to pay off your debt. So if we focused on paying the highest interest first, okay, you would have saved almost $45,000 in interest. You'll only pay $8,841 in interest, and it will take you 3 years and 5 months to pay it all off.
And this is without making any extra payments,
No extra payment.
changing the order of how you pay it.
Yep.
Amazing.
Amazing, right? And you know how sometimes people would say, okay, do the snowball method or do the avalanche method. This will show you both methods and tell you exactly. It's a mathematical formula. It will tell you whether doing the avalanche or the snowball is better for you. Okay. See, even if you targeted the lowest balance first, it would still take you 3 years and 5 months. And this is with your student loan.
Sometimes that's motivating for people to pay
Yeah.
off that smallest
You
debt, knock it off their list, and then
yeah,
move on to the next. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, pay off that Gap card first, and then the Nordstrom second, right? And then
I saw something like 20% on one of those cards.
29.
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
that's not surprising, actually.
Not unusual.
When you're already have a lot of debt and you're trying to get approved for another credit card, you're actually going to get a higher interest rate. So we just wanted to show you this, because this is, you can actually run this before you even get on another debt. Because remember, in this first screen, say here, there's another space for a new creditor information. So you got a quote, for example, and they say, okay, this will be your monthly, this is your interest rate, and then run it. Does that fit in your financial goals? Is that making room for just, more debt, or making room for more savings for you? Is that how you're seeing your financial future? So that's why we wanted to show you this. If you're interested, we highly encourage you to go to powerpay.org and put in your information. This is a free tool, and it saves multiple profiles if you want to play scenarios or pick and choose what kind of debts you want to work on. So it's a really great tool. So now I'm going to give back, I'm going to give Vincenza back the time, because she's going to talk about net worth, because that really is going to motivate you to look into what your financial future could be like.
Okay. So when we talk about net worth, I mean, when I was in college, I wasn't thinking what's net worth. I didn't even know what it meant, really. But so when we talk about net worth, it's a very simple equation in terms of we're looking at all of your assets, so everything that you own that you could liquidate for cash. And then the other side of the equation, you have to take away everything that you owe, and what you'd be left with if I cashed out everything, sold all my stuff, and then I paid off my debts, what would I be left with? That would be my net worth. And I just wanted to mention, it's not unusual to have a low or even negative net worth when you're young. Say you're in college, you have a car and you're making payments on it, you don't have a lot of income, or you just bought a house and you don't have any equity in it. That is not unusual the younger you are to have a low or negative net worth. So it's not meant to be a discouraging number to look at, but just as a way to kind of gauge where you are in your overall financial, let's say, outlook or financial health. So when I talk about assets, I'm talking about checking, savings, if you have retirement accounts, if you're going to sell your car, you have collectibles, all that stuff. That's what we mean by assets. And then liabilities would be what you owe on your credit cards, except if you're paying them off every month, you wouldn't include that in your calculation. Any student loans, personal loans, payday loans, title loans. And then if you're going to use if you have a mortgage and you have a home, you would put the current market value of the home as an asset, and then the liability, you would put what you owe for the mortgage. So I want to point out that your income is not included in the net worth calculation. There's nothing in here about how much money do I make every year, every month. You can make a lot of money and you can have a low net worth because you're spending everything that you're making, or spending what you're making and more because you have a lot of debt. So like I told you that example about that gentleman that was a janitor and a gas attendant, you can still have a pretty decent net worth if you're committed to saving some of your income every month. So I want to show you real quick how, I'm going to share my screen. I want to show you real quick what that would, real quickly, how you would calculate that. There's a lot of great calculators out there. This is just one that I pulled up that I thought was pretty simple to use. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. It's on a website called NerdWallet, and they have a really simple, if you're curious to see, okay, what's my net worth? So let's say I have a house and the market value of that house is about $300,000. I went on Zillow or I went on realtor.com and I looked at it. And let's say I just bought the house. So I barely have had any time to chip away at that mortgage. So I still owe $290,000 on that house. Checking account, let's say I have $2,000 in my checking account. Let's say I've got $3,000 in consumer debt. Let's say I have about $1,500 in a savings account. I took out $1,500 personal loan. Let's say I have about $5,000 in my retirement account. I still have $5,000 left to pay on my student loan. And let's say you have a car. Its market value, if I looked up Kelley Blue Book value, it's about $8,000. But I actually have paid off that car, so I don't have to put anything on the liability side because it's paid for. And if you wanted to include any other debt, you could. So here's your calculation. Everything that I own minus everything that I owe. My net worth, if I were to sell everything off, pay off all my debt, I would have $17,000. Now over time, obviously, if my house is appreciating in value and I'm paying off that mortgage, my net worth is going to go up. If I'm continuing to put money in my retirement account, I'm paying down my debt, that number over time, we hope, the whole point of it is that we hope over time that number is just going to go higher and higher and higher. And just remember that when you're talking about net worth or calculating your net worth, it is like taking a picture in time. It's a snapshot, and your net worth could change overnight. You could, I want to go out and buy a $60,000 Tesla, right? Tomorrow, I'm going to do that. Well, and I'm going to take out a loan for $60,000. Then my net worth went down by 60,000, right? Or let's say I got an inheritance or a windfall, and I put that in my savings, or I pay down debt. That's going to increase my net worth. So it's a very fluid number. We just hope that, over time that number continues to go up. So I just wanted to show you real quick, going back, Jeremy, to the, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Going back to the presentation, I wanted to show you what the average net worth is in the US. They can stop sharing here. Okay, there we go. So just to give you some perspective on what this looks like. So every 3 years, the Federal Reserve, they actually publish a survey of consumer finances. So the data in this table was published in September of last year, and it's from data from 2019. So just to illustrate by age, so as you can see, the younger you are, typically the lower your net worth is. And as you get older, people that are 75 or older typically aren't working, and they're actually using those assets that they built over their life. That's why they probably have a negative net worth. They're no longer adding to their net worth, but a lot of times they're spending down all that money that they saved for their retirement. So it's just to illustrate the point that it takes time to build net worth, and it's not unusual to have, a lower net worth when you're younger. So you might be wondering, well, why should I track my own net worth? Well, 3 things. it can be a good overall measure of your financial health because it looks at the big picture. It looks at everything, what you own and what you owe. And you might have some debt, but it may not be as bad because you have assets, as part of that debt that are putting you in a good position overall. And also the second thing to note is net worth is a more important indicator than your actual income. Remember, we don't use income in the calculation for net worth. We probably all know people that make good money but spend it just as quickly as it's coming in. And so if you only look at income, it might seem like on the outside like they're wealthy, but if they'll never build net worth if they spend all they make and they don't use their money wisely. And also these people that have high income, it's a lifestyle thing. So if they're spending everything that they're making and all of a sudden something happens when that income goes away, they have a medical emergency, lose their job, things can happen. Then what happens if you're depending on that high income? The last thing is that it can be really a great motivator. The whole point of tracking your net worth is just, again, to see that trajectory of your net worth increasing over time. And it makes it easier to see how you are progressing in your life. And if you don't feel like you're progressing fast enough, you're going to see that if you track it. And you'll have time to see, okay, what do I need to do to change this? But it's actually increasing instead of decreasing. Maybe you have a target, like my husband and I have, a dream sheet and some life goals. And just to give you an example, let's say one of my life goals is by the time I retire at age 67, I want to have $1 million net worth. And so how do I know how to get there if I'm not tracking it? How do I know that I'm on track? And so we actually, we check it every quarter. Some people say check it every month, at least check it once a year, I would say, and just see how you're doing. It can be a great motivator, especially if you're paying down debt. I know that when we paid off, we had a lot of debt, and just getting rid of that put us in a much better position. And so it can just act as a motivator to see your liabilities, your debts, paying off your debt, and seeing your assets go up. And it's really just about another way to kind of look at your overall financial picture and paying attention and being intentional, knowing that those decisions that we make in life that have to do with money, how does that affect our overall picture when we look at our financial goals and our financial well-being? Okay, so that was a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up tonight? Jeremy, would you like to wrap things up for us?
Yeah, but like Vincenzo said, we gave you a lot of information. This was like, here you go, take it with you. But we want you to think about three things. Okay, we started off this presentation, this webinar, by telling you we are going to cover three things, and we hope that you, as you move forward with this information that we shared with you, that you would think about these three things before you take on new debt. Okay, calculate your debt to income ratio to determine if there's room for more debt in your life as it stands right now. Not only because you want to make sure that you are able to afford that loan, but for you to see if you even qualify for that new loan. Maybe you really want to buy something new, maybe get a new car or buy a home right now, but if you don't do your homework, maybe you don't even qualify. And if you did qualify because of your debt to income ratio, then the structure of your loan might not be to your advantage. So calculate your debt to income ratio to determine if there's room for more debt. Okay, the second one is to visualize your debt using a real debt report. Like I said, we are going to send you a worksheet to get this going. And we encourage you to go visit powerpay.org. If you want to be on top of your debt, you're managing multiple debts, use that tool. It's free. And it feels very motivating when you see that, okay, if I didn't do anything about my debt and just pay minimum, this is how long it's going to take me, and this is how much I'm going to be paying on interest. And then you make it work its magic, and it will show you, well, actually you can pay that off faster and you can save more on interest. So go do that. We encourage you to do that. And then the last one is to know your net worth and decide if, based on your current net worth, taking on a new loan fit with your long-term financial goal? If your goal is to retire at a certain age and have a certain net worth, will taking on a new loan derail you from that, right? So we hope that these three things you'll keep in mind before you take on new debt. And just before we wrap up, we just want to know, from all these information that we shared with you tonight, if you could share in the chat, what is one thing that you're motivated to do now, as as a result of learning these things?
Or one takeaway, like what is
Yeah,
one
one
thing
takeaway.
that
We are at our 1 o'clock webinar. We had one participant say that her son is thinking of um, buying a new car. So now she's gonna teach her son to create a debt report first before even going to the dealership. Hayden, that's a great that's a great plan. Go to PowerPay. It seems like PowerPay is our star tonight, which is great. We really encourage people who want to be on top of their debt to go to PowerPay, to just see how the magic works. And it's really empowering when you see those numbers go down, and it gives you a payment calendar, and it shows you, by the way, you can pay it quicker and you could save more on interest if you follow a certain strategy, if you pick a certain payment strategy. So great, that is so great to know, that you are motivated to do that. We are glad to hear that. So we are grateful that you are here tonight. Thanks for joining us. We'd love to hear. Oh, one more thing. Valeria, she said, I'm motivated to calculate my husband and my net worth and see how we can improve it and create more long-term goals. Great, great. It's a great starting point. Start creating that financial vision board for you and your spouse, and create a trajectory for a great financial future. That's awesome. So, like I said, we're happy that you were able to join us tonight. We'd love to hear your feedback. We would love to um, improve our courses. We are offering these webinars in partnership with Utah Department of Workforce Services. So we would like to report to them what you're learning as well, and what you plan to do as a result of attending our webinar. So if you can complete our survey, it's just super quick survey, 2 minutes at most. Here's the link. And if we could put that link on the chat as well. And you can also scan this QR code. It will take you straight to that survey. Um, and then if you take that survey, you can be entered into a drawing. So and we announce our drawing winners at the end of the month, and you might be the lucky one to get one of our cool swag. So we encourage you to take that survey. Would love to learn what you think about our webinars. Also, you could join us on the blog. We are always sharing great personal finance tips on the blog, utahmoneymoms.com. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, on YouTube at Utah Money Moms. And you can register for more of our webinars check our full schedule. As of now, we have our full schedule up to the end of April. Go to finance.usu.edu/EFW. Also, if you want to host a class for your community, especially if you're in Utah, all you need to do is get up to at least 8 people together. Let us know, contact us. We'll bring the resources, we'll bring the expertise, we'll teach the class. All you need to do is get those people together, and we'll teach a free class to your community. You can go to that same link, finance.usu.edu/EFW, and there's an option there that says host a class, and it will get that process started, sort of like an intake process where we start that process with you, and talk about specifics, what kind of topic we could teach you and or your community. So I know Hayden said he works for workforce services, so for DSPD, that's great. If you want to host a class, let us know, and we'll I know you're in American Fork, right, Hayden? So we can certainly do that if you could get a group together and we can teach that class. So we are happy that you're here. Thanks for joining us tonight. We hope that you are able to join us again in our future webinars. If you don't have any more questions, and we don't have any more questions for you, but we sure are glad that you're here. We hope that you have a great night. We'll see you again soon.